Jamaica's domestic flights are back after 20 years. Welcome to episode 99 of The Unequal Perspective. Hi, I'm Matt, and I'm joined by Sarah, and Rich is managing our soundboard. Today we're looking at something pretty big, actually, something that's, it's been a long time coming. After 2 whole decades, 20 years, domestic flights are set to return within Jamaica.
Yeah, it's a really significant development. Definitely caught some people by surprise.
Absolutely. So our mission today, really, is to unpack this whole story. How did we get here? We want to explore the journey from when these flights were really popular to why they disappeared for so long. And now, this comeback, we're going to try and get into the how and the why so you understand not just the headlines, but what it really means.
Exactly. And it touches on some fascinating themes, doesn't it? Regional connectivity, economic development in the Caribbean. It's more than just a new route opening up. It's kind of a historical moment, especially if you know Jamaica, and the challenge of getting around the island. So we'll definitely look beyond the basic news and figure out why this matters for travelers, yeah, but also for Jamaica itself.
Okay, let's dive into the specifics then, because the details here are, they're key to understanding what's happening. So first off, who's actually running these flights? Who's behind this restart?
Right, so the operator is LIAT 2020 Limited, and it's really important to stress this isn't quite the same LIAT people might remember from, years past. This is a restructured airline based in Antigua and Barbuda now. It basically emerged after the financial collapse and shutdown of the original LIAT.
Oh, okay.
So this reconstitution, it's an attempt to start fresh, a more sustainable chapter, hopefully, for a name that has a long, sometimes complicated history in Caribbean aviation.
That context is super important. The reconstituted part, it signals a new strategy, maybe. Not just reviving an old name.
Precisely.
And the road itself. What connection are we talking about here?
We're talking the main artery, really. Kingston, that's Norman Manley International. Kingston connecting over to Montego Bay's Sangster International, MBJ, and back, of course.
The classic Kingston MBJ run.
Exactly. And the CEO of MBJ Airport, Shane Monroe, actually confirmed this restart. He mentioned it at their forum, which suggests, strong local backing for this.
Okay, so local airport authorities are pushing for it too.
Yes. And what's really interesting here, I think, is that this isn't just LIAT deciding to fly one route in Jamaica on its own. This service, it's actually part of a much bigger picture. It's tied into LIAT 2020's broader regional relaunch and expansion plans.
Right.
Yeah, it's structured as a joint venture. You've got the government of Antigua and Barbuda involved, and, this is the interesting bit, Airpeace from Nigeria.
Wait, Airpeace, the Nigerian airline in the Caribbean.
That's the one, yeah.
Huh, that's unexpected. What does that mean? Bringing an African carrier into this mix.
Well, it's definitely a fascinating dimension, isn't it? The involvement of Airpeace, a major player from West Africa. It suggests it's more than just, finding cash. It hints at a bigger strategic play.
Like what, maybe?
Could be several things. Perhaps establishing some kind of transatlantic connection, maybe feeding traffic from Africa into the Caribbean differently, bypassing the usual hubs in Europe or North America.
Wow, okay. That could really shake things up.
It could. It definitely changes the competitive dynamic. It presents a potentially more robust model than some of the purely regional efforts we've seen struggle in the past.
And back in Jamaica, you mentioned the airport CEO, Shane Monroe, pushing for this.
Right. That signals a clear strategic goal from the Jamaican side, especially Montego Bay, to boost connectivity. Mo Bay is crucial for tourism, obviously.
So it's not just LIAT saying, let's fly here. It's a coordinated effort, supported by stakeholders across different regions.
It certainly looks that way. Multiple players, multiple continents, all aligning on this. It feels different.
Okay. That strategic background is really helpful. Let's get practical now for, people who might actually want to use these flights. What about the schedule? How often are these flights going to run?
Well, the target start date seems to be around July 11th, 2025. That lines up with LIAT's wider Jamaica plans. And the initial schedule they've put out indicates 3 flights a week each way.
Okay, 3 times weekly. Which days?
So if you're flying Kingston to Montego Bay, that's planned for Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays.
Wed, freeze, sun. Got it.
And then coming back, Montego Bay to Kingston, that would be on Mondays, Thursdays, and Saturdays.
Sat. Okay, so it covers the week pretty well.
Yeah, it seems designed to offer a fairly consistent option, throughout the work week and weekend.
Right. And the big question, the cost. What are we looking at for fares? Especially compared to, say, driving or taking a bus?
Good question. So based on the promotional materials LIAT has released, this has been picked up by outlets like Caribbean Journal, C&W, the indicative starting fare is US $122 one way.
122 US one way. Does that include taxes and stuff?
Apparently, yes. That figure is quoted as including taxes.
Okay.
But, like with any airline, especially these regional turboprop services.
Right, the smaller planes for shorter routes.
Exactly. Fares are almost certainly going to vary. It depends on the day, how far ahead you book, that sort of thing.
And baggage fees, change fees. Those are probably extra.
Oh, almost definitely. That's pretty standard these days, especially on these kinds of fares. You'd need to check the fine print.
So $122 plus potentially bags. How does that stack up, time versus money?
Well, that $122 starting point, even with taxes in, it seems positioned to be competitive, particularly when you factor in the time saved compared to the drive.
Which can still take a few hours, right?
Yeah.
Depending on traffic.
Easily. So flying could potentially make it accessible not just for, say, business travelers or high-end tourists, but a slightly broader group.
And for tourism, what's the potential impact there?
I think enhancing connectivity from Montego Bay is key. That's where most international tourists arrive, right?
Yeah.
So making it easier for them to hop over to Kingston or maybe explore other parts of the island without that long drive, it could really help spread the tourism dollars around more, encourage people to see more than just the resort areas.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
A quick flight makes a two-center holiday much more feasible.
Exactly. Deeper exploration, potentially.
Okay, so this comeback feels significant. But to really get why it's such a big deal, we need to remember there was a time when Jamaica had pretty active domestic flights. Let's rewind a bit. What was that golden age like?
Yeah, you really have to look back to the late 1990s, maybe early 2000s. That was the peak period. It was mainly under Air Jamaica Express. They operated from 1996 through to 2005.
Air Jamaica Express, that was like the domestic arm of Air Jamaica.
Essentially, yes. Air Jamaica had acquired and rebranded an older airline called Trans-Jamaican Airlines in the mid-90s. And Air Jamaica Express flew routes like Kingston Montego Bay, but also Kingston Negril, for instance.
Kingston to Negril, wow. Imagine skipping that long, winding drive.
Exactly. That was the appeal. Zipping from the city buzz of Kingston straight to the beaches or vice versa in, maybe 30, 40 minutes instead of several hours on the road.
Huge time saver.
Huge. For tourists wanting to maximize beach time and for business people moving between the major cities, it was a really valuable service. It wasn't just transport. It was enabling a different way to experience or work across the island.
I can see the appeal. What about the actual numbers? Did lots of people use it?
Oh, yeah. The stats from back then are quite telling. If you look at Kingston's Tinson Pen Aerodrome, that was the main domestic hub at the time.
Tinson Pen, right near Kingston proper.
That's the one. Passenger numbers there grew pretty steadily. In 1997, they handled around 62,000 passengers.
62,000.
By 2001, that had climbed to over 92,000 passengers.
Wow, 92,000. That's quite a jump in just 4 years.
It is. It really underscores that there was significant demand back then, a real appetite for quick travel between the key points on the island.
So the market was definitely there. People wanted to fly domestically.
Absolutely. The numbers suggest a pretty strong, almost inherent demand for that kind of intra-island speed and convenience. The challenge, which became clear later, wasn't so much about if people wanted it, but more about how to make the business of providing it work long-term, especially with changing conditions on the ground.
Right. Which brings us to the inevitable question. If demand was so strong, peaking at over 90,000 passengers a year, why did it all stop? Why did these flights disappear for 2 whole decades?
Well, that's where it gets complicated. It wasn't just one single thing, but more like a confluence of factors, a perfect storm, almost.
Okay, break it down for us. What were the main pressures that grounded Air Jamaica Express back in 2005?
The number one reason cited was pretty straightforward: profitability. Or rather, the lack of it.
Just wasn't making money.
Exactly. Running regional air services, especially short hops with those smaller turboprop planes, is notoriously tricky financially.
Why is that? They seem efficient for short routes.
They are fuel efficient, relatively speaking, but they're very sensitive to costs. Fuel price fluctuations can hit hard. Maintenance costs per passenger can be higher than on larger jets.
Okay.
And on these short domestic routes, you often can't charge super high ticket prices because people do have alternatives, even if they're slower. So the margins get squeezed really easily.
So thin margins, sensitive to costs. That sounds like a tough business.
It really is. It needs constant, careful management to balance the fares you can realistically charge with the unavoidable operational costs, particularly in island nations.
And you mentioned changing conditions on the ground. I assume you mean roads.
Precisely. That was the other massive factor hitting domestic flights. During the 2000s, Jamaica undertook a major infrastructure project, the build-out of Highway 2000.
Ah, yes, the highway project. Big deal for the
A
country.
huge deal, plus other general road improvements. And what that did specifically for the Kingston to Montego Bay corridor
Right,
was dramatically cut down the driving time.
right. What used to be maybe a 4 or 5 hour drive or more.
It became significantly quicker, maybe closer to 2.5, 3 hours, depending on the exact start and end points and traffic. Much more comfortable, too.
Okay, so the highway essentially eroded the main advantage of flying that route, the time saving.
Exactly. Suddenly, the time difference between flying, including getting to from airport security, etc., and driving became much less compelling for a lot of people. Why pay the flight cost if the drive is now relatively quick and easy? It made it much, much harder for the airline to justify its fares and maintain passenger numbers, what the industry calls yields.
So people started driving more, flying less on that key route?
That's the logical impact. And interestingly, this wasn't unforeseen. I remember seeing a World Bank transport note around that time that basically flagged this exact risk that major road improvements could undercut the viability of short-haul domestic air travel.
Wow. So the very infrastructure that helped the country also inadvertently killed off the domestic airline business, at least for a while.
It created a much tougher competitive landscape for the airlines, yes. A classic example of how different transport modes interact.
And Air Jamaica Express wasn't the last attempt, right?
Mhm.
Weren't there others that tried and failed in those intervening years?
That's right. It wasn't like the idea just died completely in 2005. There were a few more fragmented attempts later on, like,
Who?
well, there was Jamaica Air Shuttle. They tried running Kingston Montego Bay routes starting around 2009.
Okay, how did they do?
They lasted a few years, but suspended services in 2013. The reasons they gave were familiar: high fuel costs plus a generally weak economy at the time, making demand sluggish,
So same pressures again.
pretty much. And then even more recently, around 2019, there was another very brief effort by an outfit called Jamaica Express. They offered some limited domestic schedules, too.
And that didn't stick either.
No, that also stopped relatively quickly. These later attempts, one source described them as fits and starts. They just never managed to build up any sustained momentum or scale.
Just couldn't crack the code, it seems.
It really highlights how challenging this specific market is.
Yeah.
You've got the underlying economic factors, you've got the competition from improved roads, and you've got the inherent difficulties of running a small airline profitably. For nearly 2 decades, the conditions just weren't right to make it work consistently in Jamaica.
What a story, though. From those highs in the late 90s with almost 100,000 passengers a year, through that decline driven by costs and better roads and those difficult years with failed restarts.
Yeah.
And now, here we are, witnessing this really quite exciting relaunch attempt with LIAT 2020 Limited. It definitely feels like an important moment for Jamaica's connectivity, for its tourism sector. It opens up possibilities again.
This certainly does.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us as we explored the ups and downs of Jamaica's domestic skies. It's been fascinating.
It really has. And maybe as we wrap up, here's something for you, the listener, to think about. Considering everything we've just discussed, that history of peak demand, the reasons for the long decline like profitability in the highway, and those previous unsuccessful attempts to bring it back, what specific things do you think will be most critical for LIAT 2020, limited to get right this time? What factors will determine if they can succeed where others couldn't? And maybe think beyond just Jamaica, too. How might the success, or indeed the struggles, of this venture influence how other Caribbean nations think about their own internal connectivity and regional travel strategies? It's definitely something worth watching.